is the HP-71B still relevant? This thing. We're mostly talking about RPN calculators, but this was a beautiful machine produced by HP. What year was it? I don't think I've got a note on it, actually.
Well, it's IEEE standard for math calculations.
Mm-hmm. It's terrific for math calculations. Okay, it was discontinued 25 years ago. They still made them. This one was made in 1999, and they still made them until 2001 for internal use. And that's one of the reasons why the 71 was so interesting. They were making the HP-75C, which was like this, but about twice as big, and they were making this at the same time. Now, Hewlett-Packard normally, if they have two competing models, will cancel one so as not to stop sales of the other one. It's cheaper to have one production line and sell lots of those.
The two teams were competing, and I put together a group that we met with HP a week before the conference we had at HP to review and find bugs and provide a report. And I think we actually wrote the report with the IL and the printer.
Great.
For HP.
Okay.
But it was a political issue internally.
Yeah. They did not cancel this because they figured that they would use the HPIL on this to use as an instrument controller and a production line controller. You're agreeing, thank you. So they couldn't cancel it. And the other one they had to sell, so they didn't cancel it, and it came out. But it was basically a machine for companies to use products rather than for private individuals like us. And it was incredibly expensive, like $600 or something.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Okay. It was too expensive for an ordinary person to buy. Tapani Tarvainen, who some of us may remember, a Finnish enthusiast, says he was a student at the time, and he survived on bread and water for 3 months while collecting his student money to buy one of these.
Now, you're going to mention the three ROM sequences and the one that's they corrected it, and it was so bad that they pulled it back right away again. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the story of that. The pre-production units have got one AAAA. Right. The production units are one BBBB. Right. They then produced a one CCCC, and the third of the ROMs there had a huge bug in array resizing. If you resized an array, the whole thing crashed. So they produced a 1CDCC. And the 1CCCC models are incredibly rare, and I regret sending mine back to HP to be updated because now I haven't got one. Anyway, they are around. There are not many of them. They were a very interesting product. And one of the interesting things about it was that HP released the internal documentation with comments, which was unusual. They'd done it for the 75 as well, but the documentation for this was sold, again, at a huge price, $700 or something.
There was one particular function I remember. I don't know if it was handling string functions, but if you used that as a database, it was incredibly fast to pull out the data. Yeah.
Okay, well, for what was it, 4 megahertz ROM or something like that, it was fast.
The function, the way they had coded the function was very fast, very efficient, and it really wasn't intended, to be used as a database, but it turned out to be very, very effective. Yep.
It was very effective, and if you could afford one, it was terrific. As I say, the internal documentation was sold very expensively so as to stop people like us buying it and hassling Hewlett-Packard. It was only expensive so that companies could buy it, right? So that people who came to Hewlett-Packard were ones who were going to buy a lot of these and needed the internal documentation. I was there when the British HP representative chose the price, and he said something like £400, and I stared at him, and he said, well, it'll stop people from, ordinary people like you, from hassling us. But finally, the documentation leaked out, and it became available for people who were looking at the later models, including myself looking at the HP28C and the 28S. And because we knew the internal documentation and we knew the instruction set, a friend of mine and I, we figured out how to download or how to look at peek into the 28S, which wasn't intended. And I peeked stuff, and then there was one instruction there that was not in the 71 set, but Bill Wicks had actually told us that there's a new instruction there. So we figured out what it was. So one reason why this was relevant, apart from being a wonderful machine on its own basis, was that it gave us the first insights into the 48 series of calculators, 28, 48, and so on, including the 49, to which I shall come in a moment. So it's still relevant because the HP71 IDS is still an excellent document for people looking at 48, 49.
How many digits was it? Was it 12?
Sorry?
How many digits?
On this, 12.
Oh, 12, okay.
As opposed to 10 on the previous models. If you are an RPN fanatic, you can get the RPN module for, the RPN module for it. Bill Wicks created a module for it that used the fourth assembly module which had been made, again for developers. If you wanted to do something like control a telescope with this, Richard, you could program it in assembly or in RPN. And Bill Wicks took that, he removed the assembly part and put in more or less an HP41 emulator in there. Except it wasn't an exact emulator. You could use the space key to separate two numbers, so you could type in one number, space bar, second number, then press plus. And that developed Bill Wicks's thinking, and that led to RPL. So another thing about this is that it was part of the brainchild that Bill Wicks finally turned into something else, into RPL.
Yeah, Bill Wicks was a manager, and the team was working on, I forgot the machine they were working on, I think it was the 48, and they couldn't figure out how to do it. And so he went to a hotel for 3 or 4 days and thought about the problem. He came back with the answer.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
As Gene was saying, there are some very, very intelligent people around. Okay, I didn't show any pictures in my talk because I figured I'd show the real thing. Of course, that means people who get Eric's drive won't have any pictures on it, but I figure if you want to look at a picture, there are plenty of pictures of all these calculators around, so it doesn't matter. Okay,
I'm sure there's images of that on the thumb drive.
Yes, of course. So it was a great machine for enthusiasts. Joe Horn wrote a book about it. Richard Harvey developed applications, including a spreadsheet for it. There was a spreadsheet for the 75C, the bigger one, and there's a whole story about how they developed VisiCalc, which was an early spreadsheet for the 75, and went to a VisiCalc conference and were ignored because everybody said you can't fit VisiCalc on a handheld, so we don't believe you exist, and go away. And they got more or less ignored at this conference, rather than, as we would, clap and say, bravo, you've got a spreadsheet on a handheld. Anyway, Richard Harvey developed a spreadsheet for this. RPN on it, as I say, if you can get the module made by Bill Wicks, or get something that plugs it in. I've already spoken.
RPN program that's a binary on Eric's site.
Yeah? Okay, Eric, thank you. So, from what I've said, clearly it is still a relevant machine, even if not for use on its own, in that it led to other products. Many of us still prefer its children, the 4950 series, to the Prime, but we can't get it. So I'm going to ask Radim if they finally will manage to get round to making some graphic calculators as well, but I'm told it's much more difficult than just developing stuff to put on the 12C platform.
Didn't you have a bunch of them for a while?
Sorry?
Didn't you have a quantity of them for a while that you sold them or something?
HPCC were given almost 100 of these when the British Social Services Department, which used them on everyone's desk with a wand, connected up by HPIL to a central machine, so that you could trace and track folders that went around an office. Everyone who got a folder on their desk would scan it with a scanner, with the wand, and the central machine would know where each folder was. So if you've worked in an office, I don't know, designing stuff or looking after sick people or whatever, you know that it's difficult when there were still paper copies, knowing who's got it. A gave it to B and B gave it to C and C gave it back to A and then A gave it to D. And then you go to A and say, who's got it? And he says, I don't remember who I last gave it to. Will you scan it? Now, this is an incredibly expensive way of tracing things, but this was a government department, so they could afford it. I can't remember what it was called. Was it called the DHSS? In England, like in America, departments get changed in name. I think you've now got a Department of War, not a Department of Defense. Well, the same happened in England. Anyway, when they stopped using them, they either sold them to other companies who sold them on eBay, or they gave them to the club. And our club, at one of its conferences, gave away a free one of these to every single attendee. Wow. You wish you'd been there, don't you? Some of us were. Jake was there at the conference. I believe Bruce was there. And I've still got 35 of them.
Okay. Now you're willing to sell them? Is that the idea?
I have been giving one as a door prize every year. I have brought...
Door prizes is a long time.
Yeah, well, when I stopped coming here, I gave them to people when I could. I gave one to Jean a few years ago, and you brought one, didn't you? I've brought a few to show, or to trade, or even to sell, and if it's sold, then the money goes to the club, because these are really club machines. Anyway, we still have about 20 that we could trade, including 5 perfect, pristine, unused ones, late production, to anyone who really, really, really can explain to our club that you deserve one. Okay, so it's still relevant, it's still interesting, and it's a great machine to use if you need a desktop companion to your PC, and you don't like the small keys on the 15C or the 12C or whichever one you're using. This has got bigger keys, it's great.
Basic.
It's basic, or it's command line, or if you've got the RPN module, you can use it in RPN. So it's still a very, very, very usable machine. The keys are terrific. They're injected keys, so they don't wear off. They still click beautifully. So it can be a go-to device for people who need this kind of device. It is still relevant, and I do hope that Moravia will make a successor, but that comes to the next topic, which is the 50G and so on. This was going to be a separate talk, but in fact I'm going to manage to fit it in with this one. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember the name that the color was given it?
Baby buzz.
Sorry?
What was the name?
The name that people at our club gave to it.
Frozen hamster butt blue.
That's it, yes. And maybe that's quite good. Anyway, this had all the things it shouldn't have had. It had a horrible color. This was a color that was forced on them because it was the popular blue for kids' toys and everything else at the time. It had rubber keys, not real keys, and even though I haven't used it much, the paint has just worn off the keys. It had a terrific tiny little manual as opposed to a full-size manual, because that didn't frighten the kids off. Instead of a proper HP leather case, it had this. So, I was very grateful to HP for having given me one to prototype. But I thought I'd make fun of it, and I produced a 1/10 size, same color, plastic cover, and it had a terrific small manual. It was a detailed, extensive one-page manual. And I brought one of these. I'll come to that in a moment, Ryan. I brought several of these, it must have been 30 years ago. It was soon after this was produced. And people loved them, and it was a good joke. And I don't know whether the joke still stands now, 25 years later, but I produced an advanced user reference for it, obviously. And it took me a long time to write. But that's okay, because I was at HP's Corvallis plant when Bill Wicks came in and said, I finally produced the HP48 Advanced User Guide. And he had a thick wad of paper. He said, this is the final guide. And it was, what, like 2 years after the 48 had been introduced. So I felt introducing an advanced user guide for this 20 years after it was produced was fine as well. And I've got some, for those of you who still remember it, or have one, I've got the advanced user guide. But I was talking about this online on one of our regular HPCC meetings. HPCC has a physical meeting on the second Saturday of every month. We've been doing it now for 40 years. And we have 2 online meetings on the first and third Saturday of the month. And Bob was attending one of these, and I said, I've got the advanced user manual, and Bob said, I haven't got one of these. And I said, I've got to get one for you. So here it is, Bob.
Collection complete.
Okay, but it was very hard to put them together. I put them together from this. This was a toy calculator sold in Britain in the late 1990s. And I said, hey, it's the same color as that. So I bought 20 or 30 of them, and I repainted them and made these. However, they're no longer available. So thinking that some other people might be interested, I bought some current versions from China, and of course I have to give it a new name. And what do folks think of G2? So I brought a few HPCC 4.9 G2 calculators here.
Well, it was complete.
I've just completed my collection of HP calculators because I've been given by Gene an HP10S2, which is only sold in Australia at the moment. And Moravia told me that when they run out of the 10S Plus, you will be selling them in Europe. But I wanted to have one to complete my collection, so I've already bought one from Australia, and Gene has given me one. So I've now got a complete collection.
Technically, the one you have is the prototype, too.
That's right, yes. Well, I have a prototype 49G, and now I've got a prototype 10S2, plus a few others. Anyone who's got prototypes, I mean, that's another talk entirely, and I'm sure Chuck can help us with that. But for today, anybody who wants this, I brought a few, but really I just wanted to tell you about the joke that it was. And given the time,
You're good.
I'm good. You have a question? I have a question to you all. If you appreciate the joke, I've already started making a spoof of the HP Prime.
Lots of material.
Lots of material, yes. And I've got some that are called the HP Prim, because it's a prim, tiny little thing, and some which are called a subprime. And tell me which is an appropriate name. And I'll end at this. Subprime, okay.
My question was about Recall 40. How is it doing, and is it exceeding expectations or doing okay, or how's it?
I'll hand that question over to Bruce. Recall 40, our HPCC club is still going. We still meet every month. We have 2 online meetings every month. We occasionally have other meetings like trips to an HP calculator museum and so on. So we're still going strong. When we were 20 years old, we produced a book called Recall 20, recalling the first 20 years of our club, plus what was going on at HP at the time. And for our 40th anniversary conference 3 years ago, Bruce, our editor, and Mark Power, our web controller, said, let's do another book. And we produced a Recall 40, for which some of you present here actually wrote chapters. We got Bill Wicks to write a chapter. You wrote one, didn't you, Chuck? Thank you. And that is what Bruce is showing. Bruce has brought a few copies. We must have sold well over 100, but it's not the sort of book that sells for tens of thousands.
In terms of, you print them on demand. I remember when I was in London, you and I went to get the Recall 20.
That's right. Yes, from a print-on-demand company. Well, we're using a different print-on-demand company, but 20 years on, we're still using the same technology. A PDF sent to a print-on-demand company. Bruce, do you want to say something about that?
Just very quickly, we had an initial print run of 200. They all sold out, but a bunch of those were given to all the contributors, got a free copy. So if you're a contributor and you haven't got yours yet, please come and see me and I'll sort that out. But I think everyone here got theirs. We then had a second print run of another 50, I think it was, and there was about half of those have gone. So I've got to the point now where I found a company in the UK who will do print on demand. So they were literally like print 10 and warehouse them themselves and then just do all the logistics and everything. So from an printing point of view, I'll do a new version with slightly thinner paper, because one of the things we found was we're just over a weight category on the postage, which is a real pain. You can save $2 on the postage simply by using slightly thinner paper. So I'll get all of that sorted out, so it will be available forever basically, but at the moment there's just a few left, and some of them the print quality wasn't quite as brilliant. There's a slight yellow tinge on that shows on the edge of the pages but not inside. Yeah, so then, yeah, we've sold about 200 I think, which is pretty good for a very niche book.
Yes, niche, but this is the niche.
Let's assume that we don't have any losses and what have you. Is there ever, let's assume things go well.
Yes.
Future, maybe a Recall 50.
I have already been saying we can do a Recall 50. By the time of Recall 60, we will be well into our 80s or 90s. Now, some people well into their 80s and 90s, hi there, are still doing fine. Others aren't. Yes, Richard. So we plan a Recall 50, and I wonder whether we'll still be around for a Recall 60. Let's hope so. I do hope to be visiting you again in 20 years' time. Jake.
I continue to say that if we're not around for the Recall 60, we'll call it Recall Indirect 60.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks. Yes, very good one. I intend to write my article for Recall 50 in the next couple of years, so that it'll be there whether I'm there or not. So indeed, Jake, it will be an indirect. Okay, I'm happy to take more questions, or we can hand over early. Please.
Question. You mentioned in your bullet there that it's useful, the 71B is useful as a calculator. How has the card readers stood up over time? Do people actually use those card readers anymore?
Yeah. Oh yeah, but I haven't heard of any card reader problem. You talk about where you pull it.
If there's any kind of like timing issues with the, that's
There's still
a part of.
Since there's no moving parts.
They always work. Just that 75 and 71, they still work. And people charge ridiculous prices for they'll sell like 5 cards for $80 on eBay. I mean, who buys them? I don't know, but I'll sell them for.
Well, I had a good stack of them that Adam Jones should have.
No, he does.
Yeah, they sorted out the wheel problem on that because
Because you're the wheel.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And it's got a timer stripe, magnetic timer stripe along the bottom. So whether you pull it fast or slow, it reads it. The trouble is that they're very hard to get. Richard?
I vaguely remember, HP, for several machines, HP made an HPIL I don't know what they called it, multiple loop controller.
That's part of the thing that was that these were made for control at HP. You've got a single HPIL module that you can buy and plug into this.
Right, but there was another.
And then there was a product called a Dual, D-U-L-E. You pulled this out, you plugged it in, and you could plug 2 HPIL modules in, so you could control 2 loops.
Yes.
But what was better, you could plug a second Dual into the first one, so you could plug an extra HPIL module in, and then the second Dual in, and you could plug 2 more in. So one of these could control 3 separate loops independently.
Yes,
So you could use one loop for picking up information, a second one for transferring information, and a third loop for recording the information. Now, I've luckily managed to get hold of a Dual, but those are incredibly hard to get. They're probably all just stuck somewhere in a warehouse at HP or thrown away. But that is one of the really interesting features of this. It could control 3 loops separately at the same time.
Now, I had, and I don't remember how I got hold of them, but the HPL cables came in different lengths. Right?
Yes.
And there wasn't the longest one was like 100 feet or something?
50 meters.
50 meters, okay. I remember at our conference in a hotel, I don't remember which one it was, I have to go back and think about it, where we had people up at the top floor and the IL cables hanging down to different floors and all kinds of crazy paths for the long cables, because I had the long cables, just to test them against noise and that type of thing, and they worked flawlessly, you know.
It was beautiful. It was a beautiful system. We put together a loop with about 20 or 30 items on it for an HPCC meeting in London once, and we ran it using a 41, not a 71, and it kept breaking because it was very hard to get every single plug holding in firmly. So as long as you've got devices that hold the HPIL cable well, you're well away. But if they are loose, then you're in trouble. And that brings me to a comment on this. If you get one of these with an HPIL module in it, and you turn it on, it is slow at turn on and it is slow when running. Because every single time when you turn it on or it sends a command, it checks first of all if there's anything on the loop that needs to be used. And you haven't got a loop. So it's looking for the loop and slow. So if you get one of these with an HPIL module and you're not using a loop, the first thing you do after turning it on is type OFFIO, off IO. You turn off the HPIL system and then it suddenly doubles in speed.
I vaguely remember working with that years ago, and there was a short little routine that you ran first and then everything was great.
Okay, yes. We've got to get that. And of course, if you haven't got a card reader, you can plug a memory module in there, or you can put in nowadays a FRAM or something like that in. So these are still incredibly powerful. So the answer to my question is, yes, the HP-71B is as relevant as it was, and the HP 4.9G is as irrelevant, but as fun as ever. Thank you.